How y'all doing this evening? Yeah? I know, it's the end of a long day. So bear with us for a few more minutes, and hopefully the Lord will do something amazing. When you woke up this morning, He had something planned for you. He had a lot of things planned for you, but He's definitely got something planned for you tonight. So I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I live under the bridge, one bridge down from Melody and John. We borrow things from each other. John, I still got to give you back your brown paper bag. I've had it for a while. It's good to be here. My name is Matthew Slyman. A lot of people know me as Crucial. That's my stage name. I've been a rap artist for a long time, well over a decade. I'm working on my 10th album right now. I was going to do a little rapping for you this evening, but I think I'd rather really just take hold of the time that I have to share with you my testimony. I did bring some CDs. I've got some stuff out there on the table if you're interested in checking it out afterwards. You know, if you want to catch out, my mad skills, you know what I'm saying? I'm known more as a producer in the music industry. I've done a lot of production and engineering for other artists. And I do all the production and engineering on most of my own music. So, and listen, if you do want to pick up some CDs tonight, I'm going to go ahead and let you know half of the money is going to be poured right back into icuTalks. So we help each other out, you know. I know I'm here to give you my testimony, and I feel awkward just saying this is my testimony as though it's the only thing I have to tell you about what the Lord's done in my life. But it is my testimony of coming to know Jesus Christ, coming to walk with Jesus Christ. Now, obviously, since knowing the Lord, I can look way back on my life, my past, even from a child, and see all the many ways He worked in my life, even before I even realized He was working in my life. So there's a whole slew of testimonies there. And then, of course, all the way up to this point, the last 15 years of my life that I've been walking with the Lord, all of the countless stories and testimonies and just ways He continues to pour into my life, ways that He continues to challenge me and encourage me and work in and through me, and the situations He continues to bring me through, the storms He brings me through and brings me out of, and just He continues to just demonstrate His awesome power in my life. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. I mean, He's a wonderful God. And He's here to continue to give us testimonies and stories to share with one another. And it really is just difficult zoning in on just, one story. But it's a very important story, perhaps the most important story of how I came to know the Lord. And I'll just tell you this, I'll take it back to when I was a kid. I grew up in Lexington, North Carolina. How many of y'all ever heard of Lexington? Barbecue capital. That's every time I tell somebody, they got to tell me about our barbecue. Funny thing is I didn't even eat barbecue until I left Lexington. But I grew up in Lexington, North Carolina. And even as a very small kid, I was a very, and I'm telling you this because I tell you how other people tell me, how they remember me, adults, my parents, when I hear stories of when I was a kid, they always say that I was a very sweet kid. I'm going to make myself vulnerable tonight, but they used to call me Sweet Matthew. I don't think you can get any more vulnerable than that. They used to call me Sweet Matthew. My parents talk about how I love to just crawl up into people's laps and love on them and hug them. I was a very sensitive kid, and I do remember that. And I think because of that, and maybe for several other reasons, as you get older and you get into, middle school and what, you become about 10, 11, 12 years old, and, that's when you really start to kind of put the pieces together about, just as far as your identity, it's kind of where you begin. And kids in school tend to gravitate towards other kids, and everybody's kind of finding who they are and who they want to hang out with and their cliques. And I ended up facing a lot of rejection. And I don't know if it was this super sensitive spirit I had in me. If I saw something wrong, I would call it out. Maybe other kids didn't like that. I honestly don't remember. I just don't remember how I became such a reject. But I was rejected a lot. I faced a lot of rejection as a small boy and even growing up. Very impressionable. You know, I was a skinny, pale, pasty white kid. Small, with humongous ears, which I'm still growing into. I mean, humongous ears. The kids would pick on me on the bus. They'd call me, Dumbo, Mickey Mouse. Just think of it. Think of any name. I wasn't the most athletic kid. I've always been a very artsy kid. I've always been into music. I've always created music. I just, used to love to draw pictures, and I just had an explosive imagination. But, when it came to playing out on the playground or in recreation, I was the last kid to get picked. 9 times out of 10, I was the last kid to get picked. I thank God throughout the years, He's helped giving me a little bit more of a athletic, physical coordination. Now, we play family basketball on Sundays, and I'm the second to last to get picked. It's me and my wife's mother. They choose me. My wife is here, by the way. Oh, and just so you're not annoyed trying to figure out what my t-shirt says, ask her if she agrees. She might have a different story. I hate that when I see somebody on stage somewhere and they've got this jacket, and I'm like, what are they? I'm spending like half the time trying to figure out what it says. But so I faced a lot of rejection. I think, as I grew older and got into high school, I kind of really buried myself in music. I really did. Actually ultimately joined a rock band. It was kind of cool at the time because I was the only one still in high school, but these guys were in college. They were going to Carolina, Chapel Hill, NC State, different colleges. They would, all come back to Lexington. They were all from Lexington, so they knew me, they knew of me. And we would jam together, and then, we would go, and here I am, a senior in high school, and I'm getting invited out to college frat parties. I'm going to some of these college campuses and playing at these parties and they're letting us in clubs and bars. And so, obviously, I'm getting involved with things I shouldn't be getting involved with. And even before then, I kind of started to get involved with things I shouldn't get involved with. When I was around 14 years old, my parents got divorced. And so, of course, I had to capitalize on that and use that as an excuse to do whatever. But things just progressively were getting worse and worse. And I graduated high school, and I was like, thank God, I'm getting away from these people. And I go to college. I just attended a local community college. And I'm out in this college, and I'm starting to make all these friends, and people are laughing at my jokes, as stupid as they could be, and people were inviting me to parties, and I was really starting to figure out, you know what? I'm not such a bad guy. Like, I started to kind of be like the cool guy, everybody wanted to hang out with. And so, I didn't really know how to handle that. I think it was a good thing just because it built some confidence. This is where I gained a lot of confidence. Of course, being in the rock band and everything, that was helping out with that. But now I'm in college, and I was around all these people who were embracing me. But then I started gravitating towards all the wrong things in the midst of this, going to all the parties, starting to, smoke a lot of weed, and then that led to popping pills, and then I was taking acid and shrooms and snorting some coke and, popping some X, so it just really was going on a downward spiral fast, and I spent several years living this lifestyle. And, it got bad. It got bad. I eventually, I did about 2.5 years of college, I had transferred to a technical school, but I dropped out. I dropped out. I was too concerned with just partying, just being around people, just, getting that attention that I wanted from people. And I started going so far down. I didn't work. I had no sense of responsibility. I couldn't hold a job. I would get hired someplace, work there for a few months, and then either quit or get fired. And so I didn't have any money. And, I was, the girl I was with at the time, I was pretty much living with her most of the time. And we were sleeping together. And, both of us were just, losers, really. we had no life. We had no life. We lived for the high. We lived for, partying and friends and getting high. And, so money started going out. And then I started thieving around. I started breaking and entering places, stealing things, pawning merchandise off the streets just to get high. And my life was in a very, very bad place. And I'm sure you guys have heard the term rock bottom, yeah? How many of y'all have just hit rock bottom? There ain't no other place to go but up. That's the good thing about rock bottom. And things were getting crazy. Look, I should have either been killed, I should be dead or locked up. I think, and I imagine often there have to be people that knew me back then that still every now and then get in conversations and say, yeah, you remember that one kid? Oh, he's got to be dead or at least locked up. I think it would blow their minds if they knew where the Lord has brought me. If they knew the redemption that's taken place in my life. They wouldn't believe it. And technically, they would be right not to believe it. They'd probably swear that I was a doppelganger or just another person that looks like this guy, talks like this guy. But really, that's the truth of it. I'm a new creation. I am not the same person that I was. But the interesting story, and this is a story, now I've done a lot of concerts, speaking engagements over the past decade, and I've never really publicly shared this testimony, the testimony, the point that I came to know Christ. I think number one, I think I have felt over the years that maybe a lot of people wouldn't understand it. They just wouldn't get it. It's edgy. It's not conventional. I have shared it with people, friends here and there, but I've never really publicly shared this. But I was living and working in Winston-Salem. I was 21 years old, 22 years old. Let me rewind. Let me take you back 1 year earlier when I was 21 years old, and it was fall, and I told you I'd hit rock bottom, and I remember walking down the street right outside of where my girlfriend and I were living, and I just remember walking down the street, smoking a cigarette. It was a beautiful day, blue skies, white puffy clouds. And I had had a conversation with my dad just a couple days earlier. And he said, son, I want you to know. We were on the phone. He said, son, I want you to know. And he knew what I was up to. He said, I'm praying for you. He said, you've got people in other cities and states that you don't even know praying for you. And that struck a chord with me. So here I am a couple days later. I'm walking down the street, smoking a cigarette, and I'm just thinking about how bad things have gotten. How knee-deep into the drugs, into the lack of responsibility, lack of accountability, all the lies, all this thieving, the stealing, the breaking in, and the burning of bridges with, just relationships crumbling all around me. And I just looked up to the sky and I said, almost kind of arrogantly, I said, all right, God, all these people are praying for me. I said, listen, I'm sick of my life. I'm sick of where I'm at. If you can do something about it, I want to see. I don't even know if I'm talking to anyone. But if you're listening, please do something. So let's fast forward a year later. Now, all throughout that year, it almost was an immediate thing. The Lord started working in my life. And within a few weeks of that prayer, I had landed a really good job, a job I should not have gotten. I'm a college dropout, and most of the people they wanted to hire, they wanted people to have finished college. And there were applicants going in from every city around, and I got this job. I should not have gotten this job, but I got it. And I just have countless testimonies, just like I was telling you earlier, countless testimonies how the Lord started to work through my life. So I continue to pray, and I continue to pray, and I continue to pray. But I don't think I'd quite fully put my trust in Jesus yet at that point. And throughout the year, I would have conversations with my dad, and I would say, Dad, I believe God is real. I feel like He's working in my life. I feel like I see things happening. And yeah, I believe Jesus is real, and I believe He brought salvation to people, but I think, there's so many different religions. God is probably just big enough to where He's just over all these religions, and it's just whatever you believe is good as long as you believe in somebody. I was that kind of a Christian. I wasn't really in the Word. I wasn't really testing to see what God was saying about these matters. But I know my father was continuing to pray, and I was continuing to pray. And I think His Spirit was drawing me to Him during that time. Well, fast forward to a year later. So I've been living and working in Winston-Salem now. I've got my own place. I'm doing pretty well. I've made friends. I've continued doing drugs. And I actually met this one guy who was a huge weed dealer in Winston-Salem. And he lived right in the middle of the hood. Big dude. Guy you didn't want to mess with. And we just happened to meet. And we became really good friends. And I would go over to his house some nights. And we'd be sitting there on the couch, smoking some weed. Some guys all of a sudden would come in on the door, put all their guns on the table, and they would make deals, and he would, pass things out. They'd pick up their guns, tuck them back in, walk out. And they're probably thinking, like, what's this guy doing hanging out with this guy? We were the most unlikely pair that you would ever see hanging out and chilling with each other. But we would get in conversations about God. And he used to tell me, his name was Travis. I'll give you that. His name was Travis. And Travis used to say, you know, Matt, I used to be a lot worse. I used to mess people up, man. I quit doing that. So here he is. He's still a huge weed dealer in Winston-Salem. This was 15 years ago. And he had gone from really messing people up who didn't pay or who fell short or whatever to not messing people up anymore. And I guess he was telling me what the Lord was doing in his heart. You know what I'm saying? But we were still hanging out. And I remember one night I knew of this contact that I had of this guy who came down from New York, and he had a whole shipment of ecstasy pills that he was selling for about $10 a piece. Now, if you know anything about ecstasy, well, at least back then at the time, I don't know what it's going for now, but at that time, it was like $25, $30 a pill. So $10 a pill was like, we need to jump on this. So me and Travis jumped in my car. We drove to High Point. We picked up, a good slew of these pills, go back. Well, he was living with a girl at the time, and they had a kid together. And he called her his wife. I don't know if she was his wife, but they wanted some alone time that night. And so I said, all right, man, let me get one of these pills, whatever. I popped one or two of them. And he had this huge DVD collection. And I said, hey, man, I'm just going to head back, to the crib. Can I borrow one of your movies? He's like, oh, yeah. So I'm looking around, and I'm going through all of them. And he said, hey, Matt, he said, that's a good one right there. And I look over, and he's pointing at a double disc Jesus of Nazareth movie. And I was like, all right, it's good? He was like, yeah. He said, that's a really good movie. So I took this movie home. I'm telling you, I've never told this story publicly before. I took this movie home. And here I am rolling and watching a 3-hour movie about Jesus of Nazareth. And something just clicked. You see why I'm wary about telling this story. Because it's almost like somebody's like, man, yeah, something clicked. You were on some stuff. That's what clicked. No, let me tell you, something really just hit me. And I was, for the first time ever, faced with my humanity. And I really understood. Something just clicked watching that movie, watching Jesus and his walk and what he did on the cross. And it just all came together. And I was like, oh, this had to happen. There was no other way. There was no other way for me or for any man that ever lived or that ever will. It had to be this way. And I fell on the floor right then and there. And I asked Jesus to come into my life. And I said, Lord, just be with me and get me through this. I'm running out of time here, but needless to say, and I'll kind of wrap this up. I started hungering for the Word. I started hungering for him in ways that I never had before. And this veil was lifted. It really was. I started to just see things for how they really were. You know what I'm saying? Like even when you watch movies and you see these little hidden messages in there, and it's just like, man, Jesus just started popping out everywhere, and the truth about what is righteous, what is unrighteous, the light and the dark was completely down the middle, and I could just see it. I could just see it. I remember being in church one Sunday. I hated the song Amazing Grace when I was growing up. I hated that song. So boring to me. But when I heard those words on one Sunday after that veil had been lifted, and I heard it said, was lost but now I'm found, was blind but now I see, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. When I always heard those words, I thought of some person saying they're lost but now they're found. I always pictured them like being in the woods somewhere and some fireman crew came in and found them and led them home, you know. I always just kind of, but I never saw it the way that it was. I was lost. I was dead in my sins. There was no hope for me. There was nothing left, nothing that this world could give me. And Jesus just came down and left heaven in all of his glory, stepped down into the darkest depths of existence to just pull me out. To just pull me out. I'd love to share so much more with you tonight. I'd love to tell you about just how I continued to struggle with drugs for a while. I was struggling with drugs 2 or 3 years into my faith walk. I just couldn't. It was so hard to let go. And it took a lot. But Jesus, I'm telling you, he's all we need. This world ain't got nothing for any of us. I've been there. I've been all over it, in the partying, around the music, the rock stars, the drugs, the women. I mean, I've really had my fill of it. I really have. Way more my fill than I ever should have taken. And I don't want any of it. It's got nothing for me. It produces death. But the Lord, he gives us life. And he gives us hope. And I'll leave you with this. It's like this one pastor said. He said, you know, for the believer, he said the worst thing that could ever happen to you can't. Thank you all for having me tonight.